I always thought catching your wife cheating would be a lot more cinematic. Turns out, it just smells like expensive cologne and self-tanner. My name is Alex Foster, and I'm 41 years old with a receding hairline that my wife Diana likes to call distinguished when she's feeling charitable. Most days, she just calls it disappointing, like everything else about me. I work as an IT consultant, which means I fix rich people's computers and pretend their problems matter. It pays well enough to keep Diana in her designer handbags and weekly spa appointments. The snowstorm that canceled my flight from Denver should have been my first clue that the universe was setting me up for something. I'd been at a cybersecurity conference for 3 days, listening to presentations about firewalls while texting Diana updates she never bothered to answer. Conference is boring, miss you. Read but not replied. Flight delayed. Home tomorrow instead of tonight. Same thing. If sarcasm was currency, I'd be Warren Buffett by now. Too bad my marriage is worth less than GameStop stock during a crash. I caught an earlier flight Thursday morning, thinking I'd surprise Diana with takeout from her favorite Thai place. Maybe we'd watch Netflix together instead of her scrolling through Instagram while I tried to make conversation. Small dreams for a small man, I guess. Our house sits in Riverside Oaks, an affluent Chicago suburb where every lawn looks like it was manicured with nail scissors and every driveway holds at least one luxury car. Diana insisted we buy here 3 years ago, stretching our budget thin because image matters in PR. She runs campaigns for tech companies, spinning corporate disasters into feel-good stories about innovation and growth. I pulled into our driveway at 2:30 p.m., noting the black Tesla Model S parked where I usually put my Honda Civic. Diana had mentioned her boss Neil Dorsey drove one, always bragging about its acceleration and autopilot features like he'd invented them himself. Neil runs Dataflow Solutions, the company that provides 60% of my consulting income. He's 48, married to a socialite named Emily, and built like he still plays college football. The front door was unlocked, which Diana never did during the day. She's paranoid about break-ins, always checking the security system twice before bed. I set down the Thai food and listened to the house. No TV sounds from the living room. No music from her home office upstairs. But I heard something else. Voices, low and intimate, coming from our bedroom. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking despite Diana's complaints about getting them fixed. The voices grew clearer. Diana's laugh, breathy and excited in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months. A man's voice, deep and confident. "God, you're incredible," the man said. "How did you end up with that loser anyway?" "Don't talk about Alex," Diana replied, but she was laughing. "He's reliable." Reliable. Like a Honda Civic or a microwave. I stood outside our bedroom door, hand frozen on the handle, processing the word that apparently summarized my entire existence. "Reliable doesn't keep you satisfied, though," the man continued. I recognized the voice now. Neil Dorsey, my biggest client, Diana's boss, the man who signed my paychecks. "No," Diana whispered, "it doesn't." I should have walked away. Should have gone back downstairs, gotten in my car, and driven somewhere to think. Instead, I turned the handle and pushed open the door. They were on our bed, the one Diana had picked out after 6 months of shopping and comparing thread counts. Neil's expensive suit was draped over the chair where I usually put my clothes. Diana's red dress, the one she'd worn to last month's company party, lay crumpled on the floor next to her matching heels. They froze when they saw me. Diana's face went white, then red, cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Neil, on the other hand, just smiled. Actually smiled, like he'd been expecting me. "Sorry, pal," he said, not moving from his position. She was bored. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some passionate mistake or moment of weakness. This was calculated, deliberate. They weren't even embarrassed. But here's the thing about being the reliable guy everyone underestimates. You learn to think fast when your world implodes. "That's okay," I said, pulling out my phone and holding it up. "I just sent your wife a video of this." Neil's smirk vanished. He scrambled off the bed, suddenly very concerned about his nakedness. You what? Emily, right? Your wife? I'm sure she'll find this very interesting. I waved my phone, letting him see the camera app was open. I hadn't actually recorded anything, but Neil didn't know that. You son of a bitch, he snarled, lunging toward me. I said, stepping back. Wouldn't want to make this worse. I'm sure Emily's already watching by now. Diana finally found her voice. Alex, please, we can talk about this. Talk? I laughed, and even I was surprised by how bitter it sounded. What's to talk about? You're fucking your boss in our bed and he thinks I'm a loser. Seems pretty clear to me. Neil was frantically pulling on his clothes, hands shaking as he buttoned his shirt. Foster, if you sent anything to my wife, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Funny thing about that, I said. I was going to quit your account anyway. Turns out, working for people who fuck my wife isn't great for my mental health. Alex, stop, Diana pleaded. She'd wrapped herself in our bedsheet, the Egyptian cotton one she'd insisted we needed. We can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. You're right, I said. It doesn't. But it is. I turned and walked downstairs, leaving them to scramble and panic. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system as the reality of what just happened sank in. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, listening to them argue upstairs, watching Neil eventually storm out and speed away in his Tesla. Diana appeared in the doorway, still wrapped in the sheet, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked small and vulnerable, nothing like the confident woman who'd been laughing at my expense 5 minutes earlier. I rolled down my window. Just so you know, I called out, I didn't actually send anything to Emily, but I probably should have. Her face hardened. Where are you going? Somewhere that doesn't smell like expensive cologne and bad decisions. I backed out of the driveway and drove to Murphy's Tavern, the dive bar where my college roommate Trevor worked as a bartender. If I was going to process the end of my marriage, I might as well do it somewhere with good whiskey and someone who'd actually listen. Trevor took one look at my face and poured a double Jameson without being asked. Rough conference? You could say that. I told him everything, from the unlocked door to Neil's smirk to my bluff about the video. Trevor listened without interrupting, occasionally refilling my glass. So what now? He asked when I finished. Now? I stared into my whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the bar's dim lights. Now I figure out how to rebuild my life after my wife and biggest client decided I was expendable. Or, Trevor said, leaning across the bar with a grin I remembered from our college days, you could make them regret underestimating the reliable guy. I looked up at him. What do you mean? I mean, Diana and this Neil asshole think you're going to roll over and take it. They think you're too nice, too boring, too reliable to fight back. He refilled my glass again. Maybe it's time to prove them wrong. As I sat there, feeling the whiskey burn away the last of my shock, I realized Trevor was right. Diana and Neil had made a mistake. They'd assumed I was weak because I was kind, that I was stupid because I was trusting. Turns out CEOs are just as scared as the rest of us when their perfect lives start crumbling. And I was about to become very good at demolition. The next morning brought a hangover and 17 missed calls from Diana. I ignored them all while drinking coffee and researching divorce attorneys. My phone buzzed with increasingly desperate texts. Alex, please come home, we need to talk. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. You're being childish. Answer your phone. That last one made me laugh. Childish, right. Because the mature thing would be to pretend I hadn't caught my wife screwing her boss in our bed. I was scrolling through lawyer reviews when my doorbell rang. I'd spent the night at Trevor's apartment sleeping on his couch like a college freshman after a bad breakup. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, well-dressed, with the kind of posture that screamed money and confidence. Alex Foster? She asked when I opened the door. Depends who's asking. Emily Dorsey. I think we need to talk. Neil's wife. She was prettier than her photos on his office desk suggested, with sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "How did you find me?" "I'm very good at finding things," she said. "May I come in?" Trevor's apartment was a bachelor pad disaster, but Emily didn't seem to care about the pizza boxes or empty beer bottles. She sat on the edge of the couch like she was negotiating a hostile takeover. "My husband came home yesterday in quite a state," she began, rambling about videos and threats and your wife. "It took me several hours and 2 bottles of wine to get the full story out of him. I'm sorry you had to find out like this." She waved dismissively. "Please, I've known about Neil's affairs for years. Your wife is just the latest in a long line of mid-level executives who think sleeping with the boss will advance their careers." Her casual tone threw me. "You knew?" "Of course I knew." Neil thinks he's subtle, but he's about as discreet as a fire truck. The late meetings, the business trips to cities where we don't have offices, the sudden interest in expensive cologne. She examined her manicured nails. "I stay married to him because divorce would be expensive and complicated. It's easier to let him have his little flings and focus on my own interests." "Then why are you here?" Emily's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because this time is different. This time, he got caught, and more importantly, he got scared." She leaned forward. "Tell me about this video." I explained my bluff, how I'd panicked Neil into fleeing. Emily listened with growing amusement. "Brilliant," she said when I finished. "Absolutely brilliant. Neil's been bragging about having you under his thumb for months. He loves having power over people, especially people he considers beneath him. Great. So I'm married to his mistress and financially dependent on him. I'm really winning at life." "Not necessarily." Emily stood and smoothed her skirt. "What if I told you there was a way to make them both pay for underestimating us?" "I'd say you're talking to the wrong guy. I fix computers and pay my taxes on time. I'm not exactly revenge material." "Oh, Alex." Her laugh was like ice cubes clinking in expensive crystal. "You have no idea what you're capable of when someone pushes you far enough." She left me her business card and a promise to call soon. I spent the rest of the morning researching both Neil and Diana online, looking for anything that might be useful. Social media, professional profiles, news articles about data flow solutions. What I found was interesting. Neil's company had been struggling lately, losing clients to competitors with better security and lower prices. Diana's PR firm had been working overtime to spin the losses as strategic restructuring and market repositioning. More interesting were the photos from various corporate events over the past 6 months. Diana and Neil at charity galas, tech conferences, industry mixers, always standing just a little too close, sharing private jokes, touching each other's arms during conversations. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They'd been flaunting their affair in front of colleagues, clients, and friends, secure in the knowledge that reliable old Alex would never notice or never care enough to do anything about it. My phone rang. Diana again. "What?" I answered. "Alex, thank God. Where are you? I've been worried sick." "I'm sure you have. Please come home. We can work through this. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." "Which time?" I asked. "Because I've been looking at photos from the past 6 months, and it seems like you've had a lot of moments of weakness." Silence. Then, "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. You've been sleeping with Neil for months, probably longer. You've been laughing about it with your friends, making jokes about your boring husband who's too stupid to notice." "That's not—" "Diana, I saw the text messages. Another lie, but an effective one." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "What text messages?" "The ones where you and your girlfriends discuss Neil's performance compared to mine. Very flattering, by the way. I especially liked Karen's comment about my missionary position personality." "Alex, please." "I'm filing for divorce," I said, "and I'm dropping data flow as a client. You and Neil can figure out your relationship without me subsidizing it." "You can't do that. You need that income. We need that income." "We?" I laughed. "There is no we. There's you, there's Neil, and there's me. And I'm done being the third wheel in my own marriage." I hung up and immediately called my contact at Dataflow's main competitor, a company called SecureNet that had been trying to poach me for months. Within 2 hours, I had a meeting scheduled for Monday morning and a strong indication that they'd match my current rate. Neil might think he could destroy my career, but he'd underestimated how much other companies valued good IT consultants, especially ones who knew all of Dataflow's security weaknesses. That evening, I met Trevor at Murphy's Tavern again. The place was busier on Friday nights, filled with suburban refugees drowning their weekly disappointments in cheap beer and expensive whiskey. "So what's the plan?" Trevor asked, sliding a Jameson across the bar. "Divorce, new job, new life. That's it? That's your big revenge? What did you expect? I'm not going to slash their tires or spray paint their cars. I'm 41 years old, not 16. Trevor shook his head. "You're thinking too small, man. Diana and Neil humiliated you. They made you look like a fool in front of everyone who matters in your professional and personal life. And you're just going to walk away? What else am I supposed to do? Make them face consequences. Real ones. Not just losing you as a husband and client, but losing their reputations, their social standing, their sense of security." "How?" Trevor grinned. "Remember senior year when Chad Morrison spread those rumors about you cheating on that organic chemistry exam?" I remembered. Chad had been jealous of my grades and started telling people I'd stolen the answer key. It wasn't true, but rumors spread fast in a small college. My reputation was shot, my girlfriend dumped me, and I nearly lost my academic scholarship. "You proved him wrong," Trevor continued. "But you didn't just prove him wrong. You destroyed him. You found out he was selling fake IDs, reported him to the dean, and got him expelled. You didn't just clear your name. You made sure everyone knew what kind of person he really was." That was different. How? I thought about it. Chad had tried to ruin my life based on lies. Diana and Neil were trying to ruin my life based on their own selfish desires. The methods were different, but the intent was the same. "You're suggesting I dig up dirt on them?" "I'm suggesting you let people see who they really are." Diana's built her career on managing other people's reputations. Neil's built his on being the successful, family man CEO. What happens when people find out the truth? My phone buzzed with a text from Emily Dorsey. "Dinner tomorrow? I have a proposition." I showed Trevor the message. He whistled low. "The wife wants to team up." This is getting interesting. Or dangerous. Sometimes they're the same thing. Trevor refilled my glass. "The question is, are you going to keep being the reliable guy who gets walked on, or are you going to be the guy who walks back?" I stared at Emily's message, thinking about Diana's laugh when Neil called me a loser, about Neil's smirk when I walked in on them, about months of being treated like furniture in my own marriage. "Set up that dinner," I told Trevor. "It's time to see what Emily Dorsey has in mind." Outside, snow was starting to fall again, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. But I knew that underneath, all the dirt and ugliness was still there, waiting to be exposed. Diana and Neil thought they'd won. They thought reliable old Alex would lick his wounds and disappear quietly. They were about to learn the difference between being reliable and being predictable. Emily chose a restaurant in downtown Chicago called Alinea, the kind of place where they serve foam and call it cuisine. I felt underdressed in my best suit, watching her navigate the menu like she was born to molecular gastronomy. "Neil doesn't know I'm here," she said after ordering something called deconstructed lobster bisque. "He thinks I'm at my book club, discussing the latest literary fiction nobody actually reads." "What's your real proposition?" Emily sipped her wine, a bottle that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Neil's been stealing from the company. Nothing dramatic. Padding expense accounts, billing personal trips as business travel, using company funds for his affairs. It adds up to about $200,000 over the past 3 years. You have proof?" "I have access to his home office and a very good understanding of corporate accounting. Neil's not as clever as he thinks he is." She leaned forward. "The question is, what are you willing to do with that information?" "What do you mean?" I mean, are you content to just divorce Diana and move on with your life? Or do you want to make sure she and Neil face real consequences for what they've done? I thought about my conversation with Trevor, about Chad Morrison and the difference between clearing your name and destroying your enemies. What kind of consequences? Emily smiled. The kind that matter to people like them. Social humiliation, professional ruin, the complete destruction of the carefully crafted images they've built their lives around. And what do you get out of it? Divorce on my terms. Neil's been trying to hide assets for months, thinking he's so smart. But if he's facing criminal charges for embezzlement, he won't be in a position to negotiate. She paused. Plus, I genuinely despise him. 20 years of marriage to a narcissistic sociopath will do that to a person. The waiter brought our food, tiny portions arranged like abstract art. I poked at something that might have been chicken. How do we do it? Carefully. Legally. We're not criminals, Alex. We're just people who've been wronged, seeking appropriate justice through proper channels. Over the next 2 hours, Emily laid out a plan that was both elegant and ruthless. She'd already copied Neil's financial records, documenting every fraudulent expense and personal charge. She had photos of receipts, bank statements, and credit card bills that painted a clear picture of systematic theft. The beauty of it, she explained, is that Neil's arrogance will be his downfall. He's been so confident that no one would dare challenge him that he's been sloppy about covering his tracks. What about Diana? Your wife has been helping him cover up the fraud. Some of those fake business trips were her idea, and she's been billing her PR services to Dataflow for personal work on Neil's behalf. She's an accessory to embezzlement. My stomach dropped. She could go to prison. She could. But more likely, she'll lose her job, her professional reputation, and any chance of working in PR again. No one hires publicists who've been involved in corporate fraud scandals. I pushed my food around my plate, thinking about the woman I'd married 7 years ago. Diana had been ambitious then, but not cruel, driven, but not dishonest. When had she become someone who'd commit felonies to advance her career? There's something else, Emily continued. Neil's planning to fire you on Monday. He's already drafted the termination letter, citing incompatible working styles and failure to meet expectations. He wants to eliminate any leverage you might have. How do you know that? I read his emails. The man uses password 123 for everything. He's also planning to blacklist you with other tech companies in the area, claiming you're unreliable and difficult to work with. The casual cruelty of it hit me again. It wasn't enough for Neil to steal my wife. He wanted to destroy my livelihood too, just to prove he could. So what's the timeline? Emily pulled out a manila folder. I've already contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division. They're very interested in Neil's financial activities. I've also reached out to Dataflow's board of directors and their biggest clients. When? Monday morning, right before Neil planned to fire you. Her smile was predatory. Instead of terminating your contract, he'll be explaining to federal agents why he's been stealing from his own company. I stared at the folder, knowing it contained the power to destroy 2 people who'd tried to destroy me. It should have felt good. Instead, I felt hollow. You're having second thoughts, Emily observed. Shouldn't I be? Diana's still my wife. Whatever she's done, whatever she's become, I loved her once. And she threw that love away for a man who treats her like a disposable toy. Emily's voice was gentle but firm. Alex, they made their choices. They chose to betray you, to steal from the company, to build their relationship on lies and fraud. You're not destroying them. You're just making sure they face the consequences of their own actions. She was right. Diana and Neil had created this situation through their own greed and selfishness. I was just the messenger. What do you need from me? Your signature on these documents, authorizing me to act as your representative in providing information to the authorities, and your promise that you won't warn them what's coming. I signed the papers, feeling like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. But Neil had crossed it first when he decided to ruin my career. Diana had crossed it when she chose him over our marriage. One more thing, Emily said as we prepared to leave. Neil's planning a big presentation to potential investors on Tuesday. He's trying to secure funding to expand data flow internationally. It would be a shame if his legal troubles became public right before that meeting. How would that happen? Corporate investigations have a way of leaking to the press, especially when there's a human interest angle, the betrayed husband who uncovered his wife's affair and her lover's crimes. I looked at Emily with new respect. She wasn't just planning revenge, she was orchestrating a complete demolition. You're scarier than I thought. Thank you. I consider that a compliment. We parted ways outside the restaurant. Emily disappeared into a waiting town car while I took the L back to Trevor's apartment. The train was nearly empty, giving me time to think about what I'd just committed to. By Monday morning, Neil Dorsey would be under federal investigation for embezzlement. Diana would be implicated as an accessory. Their careers would be over, their reputations destroyed, their relationship exposed as a sordid affair built on criminal conspiracy. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Diana called while I was walking from the train station. Alex, we need to talk in person, tonight. There's nothing to talk about. Please, I know you're angry, but we can fix this. I'll end things with Neil. We can go to counseling. We can start over. It's too late for that. It's never too late. We have 7 years together, Alex. 7 years of marriage, of building a life together. That has to count for something. For a moment, I wavered. 7 years was a long time. We'd had good moments, happy memories, plans for the future. But then I remembered Neil's smirk, Diana's laugh, the casual way they'd dismissed me as a loser. You're right, I said. 7 years should count for something. But you threw it away for a few months of excitement with your boss. You made your choice, Diana. Now you get to live with the consequences. What consequences? What are you talking about? You'll find out Monday morning. I hung up and turned off my phone. Whatever happened next, Diana and Neil had brought it on themselves. The reliable guy was done being reliable. It was time to be dangerous instead. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of clear skies that made Chicago look almost beautiful. I was sitting in SecureNet's offices, signing a new contract that would pay me 30% more than Dataflow ever had, when my phone started buzzing with news alerts. Dataflow Solutions CEO under federal investigation for embezzlement. Tech executive accused of stealing company funds for extramarital affairs. FBI raids Chicago software company amid fraud allegations. Emily had moved fast. By 9 a.m., federal agents were at Dataflow's offices with search warrants. By 10, Neil was in handcuffs, being led past news cameras to a waiting FBI vehicle. The optics were devastating. A wealthy CEO in an expensive suit, head down in shame while his employees watched from office windows. Diana called me 17 times before noon. I answered on the 18th call. You bastard, she hissed. You did this. I didn't do anything. Neil did this when he started stealing from his own company. You know what I mean. The FBI, the investigation, the media circus. This is your revenge. This is justice. There's a difference. They're saying I'm involved. That I helped him cover up the fraud. I could lose everything, Alex. My job, my reputation, my freedom. Should have thought of that before you started billing personal services to Dataflow. Silence. Then, how did you know about that? I know about all of it, Diana. The fake business trips, the padded expense accounts, the way you helped Neil steal from his own company to fund your affair. Did you really think no one would notice? You're destroying my life. No, you destroyed your life. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it. I hung up and turned my attention back to my new employer. SecureNet's CEO, a woman named Patricia Chen, was everything Neil wasn't. Ethical, straightforward, focused on building a sustainable business rather than feeding her own ego. Quite a coincidence, she said, glancing at the news coverage on her computer screen. Your former client gets raided by the FBI on the same day you join us. Not really a coincidence. I've been telling people for months that Dataflow had serious security and management issues. Nobody wanted to listen. And now they're listening. By Tuesday, The story had grown legs. Neil's arrest photos were everywhere, accompanied by detailed reporting about his affairs, his fraud, and his company's financial troubles. Diana's involvement was front-page news in the Chicago Tribune. PR executive helped CEO cover up embezzlement to fund affair. The social media reaction was brutal. Diana's professional Facebook page was flooded with comments calling her everything from a home wrecker to a criminal. Her Twitter account, which she'd used to promote her clients and share industry insights, became a magnet for trolls and schadenfreude. But the real destruction happened in their social circle. I was having lunch at a restaurant near my old neighborhood when I overheard a conversation at the next table. Two women I recognized from Diana's book club were discussing the scandal with the kind of gleeful malice that suburban housewives reserve for fallen queens. I always knew there was something off about Diana, one said. The way she talked about Alex, like he was some kind of burden she had to carry. And those business trips, the other added, always bragging about her important meetings and high-level clients. Turns out she was just screwing her boss and helping him steal money. Poor Alex. He seemed like such a nice guy, quiet but nice. I wonder if he knew what was going on. He had to know something. Men always know even when they pretend they don't. I wanted to correct them. I hadn't known, not until I walked in on them. But I stayed silent. Let them speculate. Let them tear Diana's reputation apart one conversation at a time. Emily called that afternoon with an update. Neil's lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the FBI isn't interested. They have him dead to rights on multiple felony counts. He's looking at 5 to 7 years in federal prison. What about Diana? Depends on how cooperative she is. If she testifies against Neil, she might get probation and community service. If she tries to fight it. Emily paused. Let's just say the evidence against her is pretty compelling. How compelling? Bank records showing she received payments from Dataflow for services never rendered. Email chains where she and Neil discuss hiding their relationship from the board. Hotel receipts for trips that were billed as business expenses but had nothing to do with company business. Emily's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Your wife was very thorough in documenting her own crimes. That evening, I drove past our house in Riverside Oaks. Diana's car was in the driveway, but the windows were dark. The lawn, usually pristine, was scattered with newspapers and takeout containers. It looked like she'd stopped caring about appearances, which for Diana was the equivalent of a complete breakdown. I felt a moment of sympathy, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with. Then I remembered Neil's smirk and Diana's laugh, and the sympathy faded. My phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Drinks tonight? I want to hear everything. We met at Murphy's Tavern, which had become my unofficial headquarters for processing the destruction of my old life. Trevor listened to my update with growing amazement. Jesus, Alex. You didn't just get revenge, you nuked them from orbit. Emily did most of the work. I just signed some papers. Don't sell yourself short. You had the balls to follow through when most people would have just filed for divorce and moved on. He poured another round. So what's next? Divorce proceedings start next week. Diana's lawyer is trying to claim she's entitled to half of everything, but it's hard to argue for spousal support when your client is facing federal fraud charges. And Neil? His company's stock price has dropped 60% since the arrests. The board fired him and voided his golden parachute. Emily's divorce lawyer is having a field day. Turns out it's much easier to claim adultery and financial malfeasance when your husband's been indicted for both. Trevor raised his glass. To the reliable guy who turned out to be anything but. We drank to that, and to the strange satisfaction of watching people face the consequences of their own actions. I'd spent months feeling powerless, watching my marriage crumble while my wife and her lover made plans that didn't include me. Now I was the one making plans, and they were the ones scrambling to deal with the consequences. But I wasn't done yet. Neil and Diana had humiliated me, tried to destroy my career, and treated me like a disposable obstacle to their happiness. They were about to learn that some obstacles hit back harder than expected. The reliable guy was dead. In his place was someone who understood that sometimes the best defense is a devastating offense, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks after Neil's arrest, I was finally ready to go home, not to reconcile, that ship had sailed and sunk, but to collect my belongings and officially end the charade of my marriage. Diana had been calling daily, alternating between threats and pleas, but I'd ignored them all. My lawyer advised me to document everything in the house before she could hide or destroy evidence for the divorce proceedings. I pulled into the driveway of our Riverside Oaks house at sunset on a Friday evening. Diana's car was gone, which was perfect. I wanted to pack my things without another dramatic confrontation. The house looked different somehow, smaller, shabbier, like a movie set after the cameras stopped rolling. My key still worked, which surprised me. Diana was usually quick to change locks and passwords when she felt threatened. The house was dark inside, with that stale smell of a place where people had stopped living and started just existing. I was in my home office, packing computer equipment and files, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Then another. Voices outside, low and urgent. I looked out the window and saw Neil's Tesla parked behind Diana's BMW. Interesting. Neil was out on bail, awaiting trial, and his lawyer had specifically advised him to avoid contact with Diana while they were both under investigation. Yet here he was, probably planning something desperate. I turned off the lights and listened. The front door opened, and I heard Diana's voice, strained and angry. "This is insane, Neil. If anyone sees us together, no one's going to see us. Your husband's too much of a coward to come back here, and the neighbors mind their own business. The FBI could be watching. Your lawyer said..." "My lawyer says a lot of things. Right now we need to focus on damage control." I crept to the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows. Neil and Diana were in the living room, and Neil was pacing like a caged animal. Even in the dim light, I could see he'd lost weight. The confident CEO swagger was gone, replaced by the jerky movements of a desperate man. "The prosecution's case depends on those financial records," Neil was saying. "If we can prove Alex had access to them, we can claim he doctored them as part of his revenge scheme." "That's ridiculous. Alex doesn't even know our account numbers. But he could have found them. He's an IT consultant. He knows how to hack systems, steal data, manipulate files. We paint him as the real criminal, a jealous husband who framed us to cover his own embezzlement." Diana was quiet for a long moment. "You want to frame Alex for what you did." "I want to survive this. We both do. Your husband destroyed our lives, Diana. He deserves whatever happens to him." I pulled out my phone and started recording. This conversation was gold. Conspiracy to commit perjury, planning to file false charges, admitting to the original crimes. My divorce lawyer would love this, and the FBI would find it very interesting. "I can't do that to Alex," Diana said finally. "Whatever's happened between us, he doesn't deserve to go to prison for your crimes." "Your crimes too," Neil snapped. "You think you're going to walk away from this?" "You helped me hide the money, Diana. You build fake services to my company. You're just as guilty as I am." "I know that, but framing Alex won't change anything. It'll just make things worse." Neil stopped pacing and turned to face her. In the dim light, his expression was ugly, all pretense of charm stripped away. "You're going to help me, or I'm going to make sure you take the fall for everything. I'll testify that the whole scheme was your idea, that you seduced me to get access to company funds. Who do you think a jury will believe, a successful CEO or a desperate PR flack who sleeps with her boss?" "You bastard." "I'm a bastard who's not going to prison. The question is whether you're smart enough to save yourself." I'd heard enough. I crept back to my office and called Emily. "They're both here," I whispered, "planning to frame me for the embezzlement." "Are you recording?" "Everything." "Good. Keep recording, but don't confront them. Let them dig their own graves deeper." I hung up and returned to my listening post. Neil and Diana were still arguing, their voices getting louder as desperation set in. "This is crazy," Diana was saying. "Alex might be boring, but he's not stupid. He'll fight back, and he'll have evidence to prove his innocence. What evidence? We'll claim he deleted the real files and replaced them with fake ones. He had access to my computer systems through his consulting work. It's plausible. It's perjury. It's conspiracy. It's survival. Neil grabbed Diana's shoulders, his voice turning dangerous. I'm not going to prison because your husband got his feelings hurt. We're going to pin this on him, and you're going to help me do it. That's when I decided I'd heard enough. I walked downstairs, making no effort to hide my presence. They froze when they saw me, guilt and fear written across their faces. Interesting plan, I said, holding up my phone. Frame the innocent husband for the crimes you actually committed. Very creative. Neil's face went white. You son of a bitch. How long have you been listening? Long enough to record your entire conspiracy to commit perjury. I smiled. The FBI is going to love this. Your lawyers too, probably. Nothing says innocent defendant like planning to frame someone else for your crimes. Diana found her voice. Alex, please. We were just... Just what? Just planning to destroy my life to save your own? Just deciding to send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit? I shook my head. You know, Diana, I thought I knew how low you could sink. Turns out I was wrong. Neil stepped toward me, his hands clenched into fists. Give me that phone! Or what? You'll assault me too? That'll really help your legal case. Neil, don't, Diana warned, but he wasn't listening. The mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the vicious narcissist underneath. You destroyed everything, he snarled. My company, my marriage, my reputation, all because you couldn't handle the fact that your wife preferred a real man. A real man who steals from his own company and tries to frame innocent people for his crimes? Yeah, Diana really hit the jackpot with you. Neil lunged at me, but desperation had made him clumsy. I sidestepped easily, letting him crash into the wall behind me. He spun around, face red with rage and humiliation. You think you're so smart, he gasped. You think you've won. But I'll destroy you. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. What kind of man am I, Neil? A pathetic loser who couldn't keep his own wife satisfied. I looked at Diana, who was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Is that what you think too? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's the thing about being underestimated, I said, addressing both of them. People assume you're weak because you're kind, that you're stupid because you're trusting. They think they can walk all over you without consequences. I held up my phone again. But sometimes the quiet guy in the corner is just gathering evidence. Sometimes the reliable guy is planning something unreliable, and sometimes the loser turns out to be the only winner in the room. Neil made another grab for my phone, but I was ready for him. I stepped back and let him stumble past me, then calmly walked to the front door. Where are you going? Diana called out. To email this recording to the FBI, the prosecutors handling your case, and both of your lawyers. I think they'll find your little conspiracy very educational. Alex, wait. But I was already outside, breathing the cool night air and feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear them arguing again, their voices shrill with panic. I got in my car and drove to the nearest police station, where I made copies of the recording and filed a formal complaint about Neil and Diana's plan to frame me. The desk sergeant listened to the audio with growing amazement. They really thought they could pin their crimes on you? Desperate people do desperate things. Well, they just made their legal problems a lot worse. Conspiracy charges on top of embezzlement? They're looking at serious prison time now. I drove home to Trevor's apartment, where he was waiting with a bottle of champagne. How did it go? Better than I expected. I told him about the recording, the confrontation, and Neil's pathetic attempt to attack me. So it's over? Almost. The divorce will be final next month. Neil's trial starts in the spring, and Diana will probably take a plea deal to avoid prison. I accepted a glass of champagne. Emily's divorce is proceeding smoothly now that Neil's assets are frozen. She's going to end up with most of his money, which seems appropriate. And you? I'm free. Free from a marriage that was killing me slowly, free from clients who treated me like garbage, free from pretending to be someone I'm not. I raised my glass. Here's to new beginnings. We drank to that, and to the strange satisfaction of watching karma work its magic. Neil and Diana had tried to destroy me, confident that I was too weak and stupid to fight back. Instead, they'd destroyed themselves, and I'd been there to document every step of their downfall. 6 months later, Neil was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Diana received 2 years probation and 100 hours of community service in exchange for her testimony against him. Their affair ended the day he was sentenced, with Diana telling reporters she'd been manipulated by a master criminal. Emily's divorce was finalized with a settlement that left her wealthy and Neil bankrupt. She sent me a thank you card. To the reliable guy who turned out to be the most dangerous man in the room. I kept that card on my desk at SecureNet, where I was now a partner with my own team of consultants. My new life was everything my old one wasn't: challenging, rewarding, and built on relationships of mutual respect rather than mutual contempt. Diana moved back to her hometown in Ohio, where she worked at a small marketing firm for a fraction of her previous salary. She sent me one final email. "I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better." She was right, I did deserve better, and now I had it. The reliable guy was gone, replaced by someone who understood that kindness without strength is just weakness in disguise. I'd learned to be dangerous when necessary, ruthless when justified, and absolutely devastating when pushed too far. Neil and Diana had bet their futures on my weakness. They'd lost everything on that bet, and I'd collected every penny of their debt. Some lessons are expensive. Theirs cost them everything they cared about. And I was perfectly fine with that.